Today we're going to be moving this colony, which is my largest colony of honeypot ants. I've been waiting for this moment for months, and I can't believe that it's finally here. I start off by taking the magnets off of the four corners so I can safely remove the glass. And as you can see, the second it comes off, all of the ants start running around like crazy. With my aspirator, I start blowing some air into the nest, and you can see they start swarming by the hundreds. They're climbing all over not just the bottom portion of the nest, but the top portion as well. It's nearly a solid wall of ants, and by now hundreds have fallen into the bin I placed below to catch all the ants that are gonna come falling out. The reason I had to get a bunch of worker ants out of the nests first is because the next step is moving the repletes, which is pretty much impossible to do if every time I reach inside the nest, I get swarmed by dozens of workers. Repletes are a special type of honeypot ant. They're the ones that act as living storage containers for the colony. Since these ants are native to the southwestern deserts of the United States, they use these living storage containers in order to be able to survive the hot, dry months where food is hard to find. Since the repletes are so fat, they're literally unable to walk by themselves, which is why every time I have to transfer these ants into a new nest, I have to pick each one up individually and move them over myself. It's really hard to do because if you squeeze them too hard, they will pop. If you don't squeeze hard enough, they'll slip out of the forceps and fall into the ground, also popping and killing the ants. So it's an extremely delicate process, and you have to be very careful with every movement. As you can see, I'm placing the repletes on a tray with a moist paper towel to ensure they don't dry out during the moving process. Since the repletes are used to being in the most humid portions of the nest, I took this extra precaution to make sure that nothing happened to them during the move. I removed this second glass panel in order to get some of the fatter repletes that were hiding in the back portion of the nest, and as you can see, these were huge. They're nearly the size of a blueberry, and I made sure to put my hand underneath just in case they fell that they wouldn't pop. A lot of people are often asking me to eat one of the repletes so I can tell them what it tastes like, but the reason I don't do this is because it would taste like whatever they're fed. In my case, I give them the red hummingbird nectar, and I've tasted that, so in my opinion, there's no point in killing an ant just to get the same taste that I can get without having to hurt one. Here there was a really nice fat one hiding in the corner. This one was a nice orangey color, and by now I had gotten the majority of the large repletes out of the nest. Here they are, all laying on the paper towel, and this is one of the most incredible sights in my opinion in all of ant keeping. It's so bizarre to think that these are actual living ants that have evolved to swell up so much to the point where they can't even walk. I find them to be so adorable with their huge butts and their silly looking faces, and here there were actually two repletes sharing a drop of nectar. I moved each one into the new nest individually, and they had all hung from the ceiling by now and were decorating the nest like Christmas ornaments. It's sort of odd seeing this, since the nest is full of repletes but there are no workers yet. It just gives the nest a really odd appearance. I made sure there were no workers on the front side of the nest, and I placed the glass on since all the repletes were now moved in. Now came the second tricky task, which was getting all the pupae and larvae out of the old nest. I did this by blowing into the back side of the nest with my aspirator, and as you can see, the pupae and larvae came flying out. This was pretty funny because I'd never tried this technique before, but it worked surprisingly well. When it's a very large colony like this, sucking out the pupa isn't really a choice because these ants spray formic acid and it burns your lungs if you breathe that in. Once I had all the pupae in my vial, I dumped them out into the nest, making sure to try to minimize any possible escapees, and there they were, reunited with their fellow worker ants. By now, there were hundreds if not thousands of worker ants that had accumulated in the bin. There were a ton of pupae, larvae, and eggs everywhere as well, so we had to get these into the new nest as soon as possible so they could start the moving process. Since the repletes were already moved in, I could now take the rubber plug out, which would let the worker ants start moving in, bringing down all the brood and eventually the queen once I placed her in as well. I gave the container on which the old nest was sitting on a couple of smacks to get all of the worker ants out of it, and I could not believe my eyes when I saw how many ants were sitting in the tray. The fact that all of these ants fit inside their old nest is pretty unbelievable to me. I always underestimate how compact they like living and how many can fit in such a small space. I dumped all of these ants into the new nest. It took me a while getting them all out, but here was the final result. Nearly the whole colony was in the new nest by now, but we were still missing the most important one of them all, the queen. I left her for last to be able to take my time with her and ensure that no mistakes were made. One wrong move and her life would mean the death of the entire colony. I safely got her out with my forceps, and thankfully all went well. It was now time to reunite her with the rest of the colony so she could join her workers and they could all move in and settle into their new home. I tried to gently get her off so she refused, so instead I rubbed her against the fake plant and down she plopped into a crowd of workers. You can see that they instantly recognize her by the way they start swarming around her, glad to have her back in the nest. Here's a time lapse of all the workers and the queen making their way down into their new home. As you can see, the queen wanders around for a little bit, but just about now, she's going to go into the new nest and we won't see her until the next time we move this colony. After hours of work, here was the final result. The colony was moved in safely, the queen wasn't injured, and hopefully they'd enjoy their new home and grow in the months to come.